Welcome to Martial Mindset, where we delve into some of the leading minds in business, martial arts, and academia to find out what truly makes success in any field of life. We are the fight coaches who will motivate and inspire you to level up your game, no matter how big or scary your goals may be.
So we are recording. Okay. Guys, welcome to another episode with myself, Bogdan, and Sifu Phillips. We're talking about self-esteem. What does it mean to have self-esteem and how can you boost it? Mark, how are you?
I'm good. It's freezing cold here in London. I say that on every single podcast that we do.
Even in the summer.
It doesn't change. Yeah, I'm good. It's I need to work on my self-esteem, so I thought this would be a good podcast to do.
Oh man, I think everybody needs to work on their self-esteem. You know, it's funny because we talk about this stuff all the time. Like as martial arts teachers, we talk about being in the need to be confident to actually win in a fight. But I see myself in moments where I need to listen to myself talk on the topic of confidence and just remind myself, you know, like change your mind frame right now.
I'm exactly the same. I've got to be honest. I think we all have those negative thoughts that leads to sort of low self-esteem, and sometimes I think the more you push yourself, sometimes the bigger the mountain you climb. I guess what I'm trying to say is, you know, sometimes I have those thoughts: can I do better? Am I better? And that sometimes taps into your sort of self-esteem as well. So I don't think many people can escape the barrage of low self-esteem and negativity that can come from it. But there's something we can do about it, and that's really the whole point of today's podcast, isn't it? To really talk about how we can self-esteem and the values of training martial arts, and how you can take that to everyday life.
Absolutely. I mean, despite the fact that we do feel down sometimes and we have this negative talk, we do stuff to get out of there, right? We don't stay there for long periods of time. And that's definitely something that we're going to be sharing with you guys listening in. You know, but this topic of self-esteem is thrown around a lot. What do you feel it means, actually, having low self-esteem?
That's a good question, actually. I think, what does it mean? That's a really good question. I mean, what are the repercussions of it? I mean, low self-esteem is a form of negativity, self-negativity. I think that's really important to sort of get across. The effects of low self-esteem are quite they're quite general. I mean, they're quite expansive, aren't they? I mean, they really go out in every... I mean, you can have people that with low self-esteem that go out and start fights, basically.
Definitely.
That's a way of boosting their self-esteem.
Like, even arrogance is a form of low self-esteem.
Yeah, actually. That's a
people
good
who are loud but without substance.
Yeah.
I feel like they're trying to compensate for not having self-esteem, for not loving themselves.
Yeah, I mean... Arrogance, do you think there's a difference between that? I mean, that's an interesting conversation, arrogance and confidence, really. Because confidence sort of, you know, there's this fine line between someone that is arrogant and super confident.
Yeah.
So self-esteem, I would say, would lean more towards I suppose arrogance would lead more towards having, I don't know, my train of thought is they're very similar. So, I mean, it's interesting you say that, actually, about the arrogance thing. I'm going to think about that. I'm going to come back to that.
I feel like in the difference between arrogance and confidence and self-esteem is the self-talk that person has. I mean, like two people can look very, very in control, like very confident, but when nobody sees them, what is their internal dialogue? I feel like the person who has self-esteem thinks to themselves, you know, I'm great. I'm really, really nice. I like myself. They look in the mirror and say, wow, you're a cool gal or guy. And the person who is arrogant but doesn't really have self-esteem, when they're alone, they're very, very critical. Oh, you dumbass. Oh, you idiot. You're always doing this stupid stuff. You know, who are you trying to fool?
Yeah.
I've been there. I've been there for the most part of my life, to be honest. You know, a lot of people, even to this day, still see me as having this arrogance inside me, and I can honestly say that it comes from not having enough self-love for the moment, being too critical with myself in that specific moment.
Yeah, I think the self-love, the self-love is important. But I mean, how do you? I mean, if we're talking to people listening to this podcast, how would you recognize if you do have or you don't have self-esteem?
Well, not to get too metaphysical or spiritual, like women are very, very, very good at recognizing the difference between them, because I think it has a lot to do with intuition, with feeling that person. If you're getting a sense of fullness by being in the presence of that specific person, if you feel more expanded and better about yourself just by being with that person, I think you're talking to somebody who has self-esteem, who feel fulfilled, let's say. If you feel less by talking with that other person, then you're kind of dealing with a bit of arrogance. And I feel like people can be very confident and very self-loving in certain situations, and the same person can be very different in different situations. Like, for example, in my case, I would feel very confident when teaching martial arts because it was my element. It was something that I felt very, very comfortable and competent in.
Right.
But when it came to talking to people outside of that context, I would feel very out of place, and people would feel smaller. Let's say they wouldn't feel like they were growing in my presence, and that would, and I would get the feedback, you know what, you're kind of arrogant. Why are you so arrogant? And I was like, I don't know.
You know, that leads me to a thought that which is a basic psychology principle of people having different roles in their life.
Yes.
So take the average person; they may be, a mother, a worker, a teacher. They'll have different roles. For example, you could be a mother, a brother, a sister, and so on. So in the roles of teaching, and certainly teaching a martial art, you have a role that is there to lead and inspire your student. That is your role.
Yeah.
So in that sense, maybe that's why some people are attracted to teaching and teaching martial arts. It's a way of boosting their own self-esteem. And that's another way of talking about. I mean, I mentioned earlier, some people boost their self-esteem by having fights. But the point of what I wanted to get to was that, when you're out of that role, you become you. Because sometimes it's a little bit like being an actor teaching.
Yes,
you have to fit a certain role, and you have to be a certain way, and especially
and fulfill people's expectations of you in that role.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're on your own, or when you're in your own company, then it's very, very different. And that's what I mean when I said earlier that we all, to a certain degree, may suffer from the negativity and the lack of self-talk, but it really boils down to what you do about it at the end of the day. And I think the difference between some people getting stuck in a self-esteem loop, or where they can't get out of it, that's the difference really, which is one of the things we were going to talk about today.
How do you help your students become more confident and boost their self-esteem?
Demonstration. I think first of all, it's modeling behavior. I think it's the first most important thing. Secondly is addressing their thought processes when it comes to doing a task. I mean, I think that's really important. If you have someone that says they can't do something, then that starts from a negative perspective anyway. And if you believe you can't do it, and it's in the back of your mind that you can't do it, you won't do it. It basically, once it starts getting difficult, you won't do it.
Or you try it, but you'll do it in such a way where it kind of proves what you initially thought.
Exactly.
That, you know what, I told you couldn't do it.
Self-fulfilling prophecy. Basically.
Yes.
I always had a perspective that I was going to train or do something in martial arts and be quite good at it. But I never thought, it was never a consideration that I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
This is, I think, the difference in mentality. When I think of something that I want to do, I don't think about I won't be able to do it. I did my PhD when I was working and studying, and working and studying is a very difficult thing to do. But I didn't, for one moment, think that
You're not going to be able to do it.
I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
It was just never a part of my thought process. It was just
Mm-hmm.
something I was going to do. So I think I try to model that behavior in the way that I speak to my students. And I think
Yes.
not just by the way that I behave, but also in the way that I get them to talk back to me. If I give them a task, then I ask them to do the task, and I try to get some feedback on whether they feel they can do it. And that way it taps into their positive or the negative approach to it. So that's the first start, I think, really.
Why do you feel so many people have this negative self-talk and they're really dealing or struggling with self-confidence or self-esteem?
That's a really big question. It could be a societal thing, to be honest with you. I mean, if you think about it, the rise of social media has really changed the way our social fabric of communities and the way we interact with people anyway. It sounds quite an out there statement, but if you think now that you go onto Instagram and you see people's lives, or you go onto Facebook and you see people's lives, and some of these lives are just completely fabricated.
Yes.
Stories of people going on Instagram and they're borrowing or hiring Rolex watches and nice cars, and then taking photographs and putting it on Instagram and creating an image that isn't necessarily reflective of their real world.
Yeah, I know.
By this.
I know exactly what you mean, because I'm guilty of doing the same thing. I actually decided to make a video apologizing for that, because I felt like I felt the weight of not being 100% authentic and congruent with who I was. And because I thought that this is what I needed to do on social media to make it look like my life was better than it actually was. So it's actually very damaging, from my perspective. Having done that, it's very, very difficult to have self-esteem when you know that you're not being honest and that you are fabricating this kind of persona, and you're asking yourself every time when somebody send some compliments or some love your way, you're second guessing yourself, and you're thinking, are they actually appreciating my work, me for who I am, or this persona that I created and I'm posing over there? So it's very, very difficult to build up more confidence, right? I'm more confident than before, but I felt that was actually a huge, huge block in me building more confidence and being more honest with myself and actually liking myself a lot more. Definitely. So I absolutely see what you mean when you're talking about social media in that sense.
Yeah, because I think that doesn't help. Look, if you're already self-doubting yourself and you're already down, let's just say you have a deficit in that form of thinking, then you're quite often going to be susceptible to looking at other people's worlds and thinking that they have a better life than you, or they're doing something better than you. Or, for example, this is a classic one. So, I get this a lot. People come into the class and, we'll be teaching, whatever martial art we're doing. And rather than looking at how they're progressing, they're looking at everybody else in the class and judging their own progression by everybody else in the class. So they'll say to me, look, I'm not getting it. And I'll say, yes, but you are getting it. And then I'll frame it, I'll put it into perspective. I say, look, let's put this into perspective. You're just learning this for the first time, or it's your first class even. But what they do, and that's a classic one, you'll get someone who'll come in and they'll look at the group and then they'll say, I'm not very good. Oh, I can't get this. And then, I'll throw it back at them and say, well, how long have you been doing this? If you look at this in real terms, you've been doing this activity for 10 minutes. You're not going to get it after 10 minutes.
Yeah.
The problem is what these people do is they look at everybody else and then make a judgment about themselves based on everybody else and their ability to do it. And that is a weakness, not in confidence, but also it it shows, it relates to the self-esteem as well.
And I think it's something that we learn from a very young age. You know, I used to come home with the grade, and my parents' first question was, "Oh, that's nice, but what grade did the other person get?"
Yeah.
Right? You're always comparing. You're always being compared to somebody else, and then you take that habit, and you look at yourself in the same way. Like, oh my God, this person is doing this. Why am I not doing this?
Well, yeah, I mean, and this is one of the things I always say to people. If you're going to judge your improvement, you judge your improvement. And again, I'm going to use this in a martial art context. If you're going to judge your improvement on, improving your training, you're going to do it from where you are at point A to where you are in point B. So, have I improved since I was training 2 years ago? The problem with looking at other people in the class or other people around you, if you're comparing yourself, it's not a level playing field. You can't compare yourself to someone else in the class because you don't know how often they're training. They might be training every day. They might be, training every day and have private lessons. They might be, or they might have, might be to the other extreme. They might not be training as much and have loads of personal problems that distract them from training. So when they turn up at training, they can't concentrate, they can't focus. You can't compare yourself to other people. That's what you have to do, is compare yourself. And that, again, relates to the self-esteem issue, because what you're essentially doing is you're weakening yourself by the self-talk of, well, looking at other people and aspiring to be. I think it's different to aspire to be like someone else, but it's different if you're comparing yourself and saying, I'm not as good as that person, because that comes back to this sort of low self-esteem and negativity.
Definitely. And it's like, we also need to be aware of the fact that we're all different and similar at the same time. I'm reading this book about the 5 elements in Chinese philosophy, and it's very interesting because like all of us have like one dominant or 2 or 3 dominant elements to us: fire, like water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. And what the author was sharing was the fact that in China, during the dictatorship of Mao Zedong, I hope I'm saying his name right. So what he did, he decided to get rid of the 5 element system because it kind of recognized people's individuality and their individual needs. And he wanted to make people more or less the same because they would be easier to control. And also because of the fact that by you understanding who you are and what you need and where you could excel at, you could improve the quality of your life. And that wasn't acceptable because everybody needed to have, under the communist regime, everybody needed to have the same life, more or less. And I feel like when you're comparing yourself to somebody else, somebody who has like the dominant element, let's say metal, right? He's very good with business and, very stoic. It's very, very difficult to compare yourself as being an element of water and saying, look, this person has achieved so much in their career. Yes, but at the same time, that person doesn't have your depth when you're thinking, or your love for philosophy, for thinking, or for so on and so forth. So if you're trying to excel at the same domain that person is, you're inevitably going to fail. You need to master your element, like your what you love to do and who you are, instead of trying to fit into a different situation.
So how do you think you would find that? Would it be through self-examination, really?
Like what element you are?
Yeah.
It has to do, from what I know, it has to do with the date of birth and the time. So somebody could tell you your element, but I think you can also choose what you need. You need to study a bit about, like, understand what the elements are, and then you can act accordingly. Like, okay, if you like to party, if you like to be around people and be very optimistic, you're obviously a fire, right?
Yeah.
If you're more calm and you take your time and you like to analyze the world in your head, then you're obviously going to be a water element. If you're very caring and loving, you're going to be an earth element. And, you know, there's different types of career. For example, philosophy is great for water element. Teaching is great for water element. Mental is great for business. So you need to embrace who you are, I feel.
Mm. So getting back to, I mean, steering the conversation back deeper towards self-esteem. I mean, we were discussing how to boost it. I mean, what are your thoughts really on how to boost or improve your self-esteem?
Know who you are, know what you are, what you're good at, and accept yourself, not what other people want from you or what other people expect from you, and just have a better dialogue with yourself. Say, you're great. I love the fact that you're good at this, right? You're really nice at this. You're very good with people. You're very resilient when you choose to, and you motivate yourself easily. Just because that dialogue is very important. Okay?
No, I agree. I mean, I actually agree. I mean, I think the first thing to do is to recognize that you may be struggling with issues of low self-esteem, and look for the signs of them. The signs generally will be obviously the negativity in thoughts, but some people are so ingrained in the way that they think that they don't realize that they're saying. For example, you say to someone, "Look, I want you to do, I want you to do 50 punches on a heavy bag. Oh, I can't do that. 50 punches in 2 seconds. Oh, I can't do that." Or sort of something that's something to the effect. That's just an analogy, it's just an example. But the fact that they say it is so ingrained that they don't think about it. I mean, I don't know if that's a good example, but one of the things that I try to look at or think about is this self-esteem loop. And it's basically what happens where you think a certain way and you, for example, don't think lack of self-esteem sometimes literally comes down to this thing of you think you're worthless on the extreme.
Yes.
The extreme. You think you're worthless, or you think you don't deserve happiness, or you don't think, there's a devaluing of yourself. And then sometimes when people are like that, what they tend to do is not look after themselves. And in a physical sense, that's the first manifestation of it. They don't necessarily for hygiene, they don't dress well, they don't have a good diet.
Or they might be awesome, and you give them a compliment, and they're like, "Oh yeah, but I don't know, it's not. It wasn't perfect."
Yeah, I must admit, I'm like that. I don't take compliments. I was having this conversation the other day. I don't take compliments very well, actually, which I'm aware of, but I suppose we all have our own fallacies. But the thing is, we'll talk about self-esteem issues in the extreme.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to say to people that are listening to this podcast is look out for signs of the way that you treat yourself physically. Because, for example, someone that has low self-esteem may think, well, I'll eat rubbish, I won't eat well, I'll put a little bit of weight on. They won't really care about these sort of issues. And I guess what I'm trying to say is it's a way of thinking you're not worth devaluing yourself. And in doing so, you create this loop where you don't feel good about yourself because you may not look good. And I'm obviously talking about it within reason. We're not going to the extremities here.
What's like one case that you had, like one of your students who came in, had very, very low self-esteem, and then like in a few months or in a few years, just like completely transformed?
I think I've had a number of students like that over the years, to be quite frank. I mean, we get a mixed bag of people that come to training. Some people are driven to training because they want to learn how to defend themselves. Some people come because they want to get fit. But the point is that deep down, some people are driven subconsciously to martial art training because it's a way of achieving something, developing their own self-esteem and retraining their mind. It develops confidence, and that confidence in itself develops self-esteem. But the confidence is the can-do attitude.
Yeah.
You can do this. And if you're in a good group of people, then it's going to be encouraged. So I've had people that have come in that have had very low self-esteem, and to characterize them and not to be rude, quite often they are individuals that are slightly overweight, that aren't very fit, that aren't very confident, tend to be quite shy. I mean, this is very stereotypical because, to be honest with you,
what's like one person that comes to mind right now?
I can think of one person, and that person sort of fits that mold. And what I noticed with that person was they changed. The training in itself developed a new pattern of thinking, but you can't really adjust thinking unless you challenge thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So, you've got to challenge people to think a certain way. So, when you're teaching a martial art, if you're standing in front of the class and saying X, Y, Z punches, 100 times, you can go over, and when the person wants to give up, you can try to encourage them. You can sort of encourage them. That's a different way of doing it. Challenging people's thinking is that where you're actually engaging with what they're saying. So if they say, I can't do 100 punches, then you say, well, okay, let's start with doing 10. And then once you've done 10, let's start with doing another 10.
Mm-hmm.
And once we've done that, another 10. And before you know it, we've done 100. So, that sometimes is a way. And then you challenge it by saying, but you can't do that, right? You can do 10 punches. And you say, 10 punches. Okay, let's do 10 punches. Now we've done 10, let's do another 10. And then you keep going. So that's another way. And then the challenge part, the rethinking, the reframing is where you say, okay, so could you do it? Because you've just done 100 punches. Okay? I mean, obviously this is just an example. It's not
definitely
concepts. But, over time, what I've noticed is when people start to see results, they start to feel better about themselves. And when they feel better, you start to get those, you start to get the benefits from it. It creates a self-belief. I was going to say self-fulfilling prophecy, but it creates a self-belief, that you see results, and then that spurs you to get more results. But it is a not constant ongoing battle. The mind is I call it monkey chatter. When we do our videos on our channel, we always talk about monkey chatter. That little voice in the background that's always distracting you and always telling you, the negative.
So, like, I'm gonna do 100 punches, and that voice is like, what are you talking about? You can't even do 5.
Yeah, exactly. But look, you've got to start with one, right? You do one, and you do another. This is what we've said in other podcast episodes. If the whole point of martial art training is that it challenges you, not just physically. I mean, it's not about learning how to fight people. It's learning how to fight yourself sometimes, and how to challenge yourself, and how to believe what you think, and use that and harness that energy and expand it elsewhere.
I think it's very valuable in the sense that when you get into the mindset of, I'm not afraid of conflict. I'm not afraid of facing ideas or people who might look intimidating. Then you kind of allow yourself to challenge the ideas that you kind of grew up with. Like maybe that you feel that you're not really worth it, or that you're worthless. And then you start to ask yourself, why do I feel that way? Oh, because this and this happened. But is that necessarily true? No, wait, it doesn't need to be true, right? Because I used to think that I couldn't fight, now I can fight. So maybe because I used to think that I'm worthless, now that I can choose to think differently of myself.
You're right about dealing with conflict. Conflict's natural and normal, though. I mean, did a little bit of work on conflict management and conflict resolution, which are two different fields of operation, two different approaches to dealing with conflict. One's management, one's looking at obviously trying to resolve it. So most of the time, you can't really resolve conflict in the widest sense of things, because you're always likely in your social sphere of operating in the social world, bump into people that have a different perspective. So conflict's normal. It's quite natural and unavoidable, really. So, but it's how you deal with it and how you think about it, I think, is quite key to. And that does come back to this self-esteem issue again, really. That you're worthless or you're not worthy when you're faced with adversity and a social situation where there is conflict, then that's going to have an effect.
You notice how usually like the people who are most critical are the people who have the most critical self-talk, who just bash themselves internally.
I would love to. I really would love to be in some of these people's minds.
Heads, right? Yeah.
What they say to themselves. It really comes down to. It really does come down to trying to change that loop, that negativity loop we were talking about earlier. Because if you believe a certain way and you think a certain way, then what's going to happen is you're likely to manifest those behaviors, and then that's going to the way that you feel. And it's a case of breaking that spiral.
How would you break the loop, the spiral?
Well, I think the way we started this podcast and what you were saying about being much more challenging your own thoughts, and also, if you say something negative about yourself, like I'm not worthy of getting that job, or I'm not good enough to be dating that girl, or I'm not good enough to pass a grading, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You've got to try to recognize. First of all, you've got to recognize that you're having those thoughts, because, as I said, for some people it's quite ingrained. They think that they can't do things, and therefore it's a natural course of thinking for them. So you've got to recognize it.
It's like, can you imagine like talking to a friend that way?
Well, exactly.
Like living with somebody in your house and just telling them, oh, you can't date that person. What are you talking about? You never get that promotion. You're too ugly, or you're too fat,
exactly.
or you're too thin, you're too tall. And that person would be like, you're the worst flatmate I ever saw in my life. Leave me alone.
And that's a good way of looking at it. If you are speaking to yourself in a way that you would never speak to another person, then that's a good indication that you've got a lot of negative self-thoughts that could potentially are harmful, really. I mean, so first of all is to recognize them, I would say. And then once you recognize them, then start to challenge them. And challenging basically goes back to, yes, I can get that job. Or, I've got something in me that I can, go over and speak to that lady, or whatever it is, that's sparking that negativity.
Yeah.
Going back to martial art training again, even within your own training, it's a case of, well, you might think, said grading. We have a grading called third level grading in our academy, which is quite difficult to attain. And many people take it, and a lot of people don't pass it. We're not the sort of organisation where people do gradings and everybody passes, because that's not the point of the grading. The point of grading is to challenge people. And interestingly, actually, I see a lot of people giving up, which is always a disappointment for me, because I think you've worked so hard for it, then you've failed or fell at the final hurdle, and then you give up. You don't go back and regroup and start again. But the point really I was getting at is that sometimes people, when I go to my group and say, okay, let's do this grading, it's a third level grading, it's quite tough, you'll get some people say, oh, I'll never be good enough to do that. And they'll say it quite naturally, and that's where you have to start to challenge the thinking. That's recognizing it.
That is so crazy. It's like so much outside of my reality, like you said right now, like failing at an exam and then just giving up. It's so foreign to me. It's so alien. It's like, do you have this when you fail at something, doesn't it just suddenly become an obsession that you need to succeed at that thing that you just failed at?
And that's what I was saying earlier about I never ever thought that I wouldn't do something rather than, and if I don't, it's not everything that you turn your hand to that you're going to be good at. And I think sometimes if things come naturally, for example, sometimes I have guys that come to I think I've said this before on other podcasts, but sometimes I've had guys that come to my academy and they're naturals. They pick it up, the martial art, they pick up training and they're really good. And then they give up. I never understand. Well, I do understand the reason why, and I'll explain it in a second. I've had many years to think about it, decades to think about it. And then sometimes you'll have people that will come in and they're not naturals at it, but they'll be with you for years. You know, they'll
Yeah.
start training year in, year out, year in, year out, and they'll be plodding along, and they end up pretty good actually.
Mhm.
So what is the difference? Well, I think sometimes when things come too easy and you hit a challenge, uh, you know, because you haven't had the resilience to work through that challenge,
Yes.
that development, the resilience to work through it, it's very easy to give up. And sometimes with people, I think, and this comes back to this things being very easy and achievable. If you're used to getting things quite easy with very little challenge, then it's very easy for you to give up. Whereas if you've had to work pretty hard for it, when you get the challenge, I think
Mhm.
it's easier to dig in and think, okay, I'm going. So, for example, going back to your question,
Mhm. Mhm.
I do something, I fail at it. I don't think I'm going to give up. I think, okay, I'm going to do it again and again and again and again until I can actually do it. I don't, you know, that is never a thought for me that, okay, I didn't get it, I'm giving up. It just doesn't happen.
It's gonna be. I was thinking like of the next generation, right? Because my parents, they come from totally different generation where they kind of accepted the fact that life is gonna be hard, that it's gonna be challenging, and that's gonna be the norm. I'm thinking of the following generation. I was watching an episode of comedians in cars getting coffee with Seinfeld, and it was an episode with Kevin Hart, and Seinfeld was telling Kevin, like, "Oh, your problem was that I didn't have any, that you didn't have anything, and you were asking yourself, how can I get it? But your kid's problem is they have everything, but why am I not happy?"
Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to be very, very interesting to see like the next generations, because life is actually getting easier in terms of, you know, having food, health, you know, access to like your basic needs. It's going to be interesting to see what challenges the following generations have, because they're going to have very, very different challenges.
Well, I mean, we alluded to it earlier when we were talking about the social media generation and, you know, potentially why some people struggle with self-esteem issues because of what they're given or presented as unrealistic
Yes.
aspirations of the social environment. You know, you look, I mean, to be honest, if you spent a significant amount of time on Instagram, you probably want to throw yourself off a building because you
Yes.
think everybody's having a better life than you. You know, you see these people all fit. Either you see people, you know, all sort of fit and, you know, posing and,
Yeah.
you know, packs, which is, let's be honest, is not the general, you know, that's not the average person. Or you see them driving nice cars and wearing nice clothes and so on. And that's what I'm saying about, it's a misrepresentation of the real world, because
Sure.
people are starting to think this is real and this is normal. But the fact is, it's not a representation of the real world. And I think that
Yeah.
if you have a tendency to be,
And it's always presented to you in a way that I was talking about it with a copywriter. It's presented to you in a way where you can kind of attain it without really going through all of that struggle. Like, it's all, here's a way for you to get the result, but with less of a hassle. But if somebody told you, look, I'm going to sell you this process, it's going to be painful, it's going to take 10 years, you're going to be a millionaire. Maybe you're going to be a millionaire in 10 years, but you know what? Even if you fail, you're still going to be a better person. You're going to be like, you actually want me to pay for this? No, thanks. And it's always like, oh yeah, I spent 1 year, I read this book, and then I'm a millionaire. Buy my book or something like that. Yeah.
it
Yeah,
is a
definitely.
shortcut mentality. But I mean, getting back to improving self-esteem, because we drifted back off again. I mean, I think challenging your thoughts was one thing. Affirmations, which I think you were saying earlier, was a good thing. I mean, looking, as you were saying, reminding yourself that you are, I don't know, you're a good person and you can do good things for people. But I mean, affirmations have to be realistic. They have to be believable for yourself.
I would challenge everybody listening in to be more aware of what your first thought is in the morning. I know you want to check your Facebook. I know you want to check your Instagram, but ask yourself, why do you want to check Facebook or Instagram? What's so awesome about somebody else's life that you need to check what they're doing, or if somebody gave you a message or a like, what's so great about that compared to you waking up in the morning and just being aware of where you are, of your body, of who you're being in that moment? What's your first thought?
I mean, I would like to add, I think to that, I would say it would be even better to go a stage further and detox.
Mm-hmm.
Have a day where you're not on social media.
Yes.
Day when you're not checking, what people are doing, and because I think it can be quite disruptive, really, to do that, and it doesn't give you a chance to check in with yourself because you're too busy looking at everybody else.
Yeah.
So go a stage further, have a detox where you're not on Instagram or Facebook or looking and just basically being in your own space.
I know a couple who, like, Friday to Monday midday, they don't touch social media. They just spend time with themselves, with the family. They have a daughter and they just spend, just like family time. No social media.
I think it's really important to do that. I really do. Because it becomes quite obsessive, really. And then you notice, well, we all know people we all know a person that could be in your company and they'll literally just be on their phone the whole time.
What were you saying? Yes. Oh,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was talking to a guy and he's training at Hong Kong, actually training at Hong Kong. And he was saying that he was in a school and some of the kids were just getting their phones out in the middle of the class.
Yeah.
Their phones and being on social media and so on while they're training, so I mean, yeah, exactly. Not even selfies, they're just sort of like going down the feeds to see what everybody's doing, and it's just you're not really in it. I mean, this comes back to the whole point of martial training, is back to that mindset of getting yourself focused and believing what you can do, really. And I think that's the most important thing. Self-belief only comes from testing, trying, and seeing the results. And when you see the results, you can believe that it's achievable. And even if it's a small result, it's a case of someone, and this is where a good martial art teacher would come into effect. That, a good martial art teacher will show you, give you a mirrored reflection of your small improvement and show that to you, and that will help your self-esteem. It will help develop your mind, and it will give you that sort of step and desire to repeat the same pattern.
And it's not an easy process, especially in the beginning. If you're used to very critical self-talk, the first time that you say, I like myself, I'm good at this, I'm good at that, you're going to hear that monkey mind that you were describing earlier. It says, why do you like yourself? You suck. Look at this, look at that. And you really need to force yourself. Like, I would give this to my students. I would tell them, look yourself in the mirror, look yourself in the eye, and talk to you like you would talk to your kid, right? You would never take away the confidence of your kid, and tell yourself, I love you, I like you, you're good, you're a good person, people like you. And it's going to be super uncomfortable in the beginning. And you do that for a few days in the morning, and you're going to see that it becomes easier and easier. You tend to believe yourself a lot more when you repeat it.
I think that's good advice. I mean, to add to that, I think seeing results as well, to go further than that, I think that's the start, because you've got to sort of break the cognitive dissonance of thinking one thing or thinking contradictory things and not acting on it. But I also think, which is really important, is once you can latch onto something that you can do, then use that to build your confidence. And even if I go back to what I was talking about before, people have different social roles and different domains of operation in their lives. So as I said, people have jobs. They also have roles. They can be, a person could be a bus driver, but the same guy could be a father, an uncle, a brother.
Yeah.
Saying earlier.
Yeah.
Then you need to then start with one domain. So if within that person who's a bus driver, father, or brother, maybe he's a martial arts student. Well, if you can pick that domain in training martial arts, and at least in that domain, you start to improve your self-esteem, it will be a behavior that you can then start to transfer into other roles that you would switch out into. So in other words, when you go to work, or when you go home, or when you see your brother or parents or family, or whatever whatever the roles might be.
Mm-hmm.
But the good thing about martial arts is that it's very achievable.
Yes.
It's accessible, and in fairness, compared to most sort of forms of self-help and so on, it's very cheap, basically. Because it's there, and it's motivational as well.
And very effective. I mean, the way that the habits that you get from using your body in the gym, in the school, you take your body with you. So suddenly you're walking differently, you're talking differently.
Yeah, which brings in itself, it breaks the loop. And that's basically what I was saying earlier about trying to break the loop in the way that you physically behave, because your behavior reinforces your thinking. So if you behave a certain way, because there's a mind-body link anyway, but obviously if you look a certain way and feel a certain way, and I'm not saying that being overweight is a bad thing, or not personal hygiene is not a bad thing, but if you're linking that with your value of yourself, that's the difference. If you're quite happy with yourself and you're quite happy with where you're at and so on, then that's absolutely fine, because obviously that's congruent.
Mm-hmm.
Congruent with behavior. But if you are negative and you're behaving, that negativity can come out in your behavior and the way that you treat yourself. And that's why martial arts is a good thing. I mean, I said earlier, sometimes people with low self-esteem start fights, but that's because it boosts their self-esteem. It makes them feel a little bit better about themselves in a different domain of activity. Sometimes, actually, this is quite controversial, but sometimes people, this is controversial, but very, in my experience, sometimes people are attracted to teaching martial arts, have low self-esteem.
Yes.
They have personal issues, and what they do, and unfortunately, the thing about the martial arts industry is not highly regulated, like being a doctor, for example. If you want to be a medical doctor, you have to go through a lot of tests. You have to do a lot of studying, and you have to be a junior doctor, and there's lots of stages of it and so on. Whereas if you want to be a martial arts instructor, in some places around the world, anybody could just set up as a martial arts instructor. And that's where you get these problems of having cults where people have, people following.
Especially if you have supernatural powers of, I touch you now and you die next week.
Exactly. But this is the thing about certain people are attracted. I sometimes will get people coming to me and they'll say, "Oh, I want to teach." And I'll say, "Why do you want to teach?" That's the first question I'll say. Why do you want to teach? And it's not because they want to help people, because really sometimes what it is because I know, it's to boost their own ego. Now, is it to boost their own ego because they lack self-esteem and confidence? And the only way they're going to get confidence is because of people are being showing them a lot of adulation and kowtowing to them and so on. All of these things are really important, I think, especially when it comes to leading groups of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was definitely in that situation. I'm still in that situation right now. I'm looking right now in my life to change my focus from I need these are my needs, to focusing on what are the needs of the people that I'm working with, and just focusing on delivering value to them instead of taking care of my needs primarily. I'm realizing the fact that if you are a teacher, your first duty is to take care of other people. Some people go into the extreme of taking care of only other people. Like, take care of other people, give them value while taking care of yourself. Yeah. And definitely it was all about me. Like in the years that I began, it was just like, look at me, here's what I can do, here's my skills, and so on and so forth. But that's a dead end.
But that's normal. But what you experienced is normal, because we're not, as I said, look, martial art teachers, it's not a formal educational process that you go through to become a martial art teacher. It's really very much a word of mouth apprenticeship scheme. where you're you're an apprentice of someone that's teaching, and they teach you how to teach, and therefore it goes down. So there's no formality to the way that people become martial art instructors. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's quite normal to do that, but it's only with time and maturity, if you are that way inclined, that you'll understand you're there to serve people and to lead people, and that's your job as a teacher. Your job as a teacher is not to serve yourself in terms of ego driven or even monetary value in that sense. It's really about people come to you because they want to learn something, but your job, if you're going to be a leader, which is very different, is to think about their needs and what they require. For example, the way that I teach in a way that I believe will help the student. I don't teach to satisfy their lack of boredom, their boredom. So in other words, sometimes some people will teach their martial art class and they'll teach lots of tricks and they'll teach lots of fun stuff because they're doing it to keep the students there. And they're doing it to keep the students there because either A, it's a financial benefit to them, B, I'm not saying that's wrong, because all of us that teach for a living, obviously that's an important part of what we do. Without that, we couldn't do what we do. But what I'm saying is they're solely driven by that, which is slightly different. So therefore, they will teach to keep people happy for the short term. Whereas I teach a little bit differently, and I'm not just me, I know there's a lot of other people. I teach knowing what they need. So I'll watch and I'll say, okay, do you know what? You're pretty weak as a group. You're weak in this area. I don't know, punching, for example. Guys, you can't punch very well. I'll be honest as well. Crucially, brutally honest. You need to work on this area. So let's work on this area, because at the end of the day, if we spend an hour working on it, you might be bored at doing that, but you're going to be good at it, and it's something you can do. Whereas spending an hour teaching lots of little tricks that they're going to keep them occupied and focused isn't really. It's not serving their needs. It's basically serving the individual's needs who's leading or teaching.
It's very interesting. Like I'm sure you have this this ability as well. You look at somebody and they make one step and you immediately see, oh my God, they need this, and they need this. Let's say, which one do we start with first?
Yeah.
What's like the biggest one that we need to adjust?
Yeah. You do the biggest problem first. That's what I tend to do. Or sometimes I'll chip away. I'll start with depending on the person's again, but it also depends on the person's self-esteem and their way that they handle information. If they can handle criticism as well, then sometimes I'll go, okay, right, you're not very good. We need to work on this. If they can't, then you have to say it in a different way. You have to say, okay, this is something we need to work on. You're very good at this. This really works for you, but this is an area you can focus on. So it really depends on, delivery of information really depends on that person.
I like to tell them like what they're good at, what's good, what needs to be improved, and then talk about the vision. Like if you improve this is what's going to happen. Like what you have already, then you're going to improve this, and it's going to be like totally different, and it's going to be a lot better for you, right? So
I mean, sometimes I am blunt. I know I said earlier, you're not very good. You need to work. You're not very good at X, Y, Z. But I do that sometimes for shock factor.
Yes,
because with
just to break the pattern.
Yeah.
If somebody's like really, really full of themselves, and
basically, it will just sort of stop them and it'll make them think for a second, and then you've got their attention, and then you can say, okay, now these are things we need to work on. But as a general pattern, I'll usually always follow up with, it's a sandwich, isn't it? You give them something positive, and then you give them the advice, what they need to work on, and then you finish on something positive, which will be, this is what's going to happen if you work on those points. So,
definitely. Okay. So, well, just to revise, what would you say, how, like for everybody listening right now, how would they identify if they can improve their self-esteem, and what could they do to improve their self-esteem?
Well, to conclude, to start to pull all of this podcast towards the end, I would say, first of all, going back to the recognizing the signs. You've got to be aware of it. And as I said, we all suffer from it to a certain degree. It's just being aware of whether it becomes maladaptive. Maladaptive is where it becomes quite harmful to you, really. So recognize the self-talk first, the negative self-talk, the monkey chatter, as we were speaking earlier. Try to see if it manifests itself in that self-examination process. See if it manifests itself in a physical process. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you being kind to yourself? Is it the case that, for example, I went through a period of time where I was having a hard time, and one of the ways that it manifests itself is I wouldn't shave. I just couldn't be bothered to shave, and it's quite normal, I think. In extreme circumstances, people that are extremely depressed will enact the same. So small behaviors like that. So what I did was became consciously aware of it. I thought, okay, I'm going to make a point of shaving, and then I'm going to make a point of shaving and dressing well and treating myself better in that sense. And that's a start. It leads to other forms of behavior.
Absolutely. Every time I dress a bit better, I feel better. I feel better about myself.
Definitely.
Yep.
And it's for your style. I mean, we're not saying to the audience you need to go and wear a three-piece suit. We're saying whatever it is, that is your style. Be happy and confident in it, and dress well for what you're happy in wearing. If you want to wear trainers and sneakers and jogging bottoms, that's fine, as long as you're happy doing that and you are dressing well. It's not a case of you don't think you're worthwhile looking on.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be expensive. I mean, a few months ago, I had the openness to tell my girlfriend, I really, really appreciate your help in choosing better clothes, because I really have absolutely no sense of dressing well. And my girlfriend was like, I'm so happy that you said it.
But people like us, we spend most of our time working solidly with other people to develop them, and we don't really have time to be thinking about but I must admit, I do nowadays try to make more of an effort in my presentation, because you feel much better for that. I do, me personally.
Yes.
I feel doing that. When I don't, and I guess getting back to the sort of summary of what we were looking at, try to first of all recognize the signs. Once you can recognize the signs, try to examine whether it's developing a loop, a self-esteem spiral loop, downward spiral loop. And if so, we need to break that loop. And that starts with challenging your negativity, your thoughts, and then also introducing affirmations to that as well.
Yes. I think it all comes down to your internal dialogue.
Yeah.
If you would talk the way that you talk to yourself to somebody else, how would they react? Would they still want to be your friend?
I think that summarizes it perfectly.
Awesome. Guys, let us know in the comments if you're watching us on YouTube. Let us know in the comments, what did you get? Like, what was the most valuable thing that you got out of our talk? If you're listening to the podcast, email us and let us know what is one topic that you'd like us to discuss in a further episode, maybe with one of our guests, or maybe we do another episode where we just sit down and chat just like this one. Okay.
Well, it's now sunny in London. It was cold, but now the sun's out, looking out the window.
All we had to do was talk about self-esteem,
and everything came out.
Yeah.
Well, it's great to speak to you guys. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next podcast.
Awesome.